Another video again about a trial deck boss monster. Yes, I'm still playing with these cards 5 to 6 months later. I've lost track of time. Blitz Gigamobile Astram has received some really solid support with the introduction of Illusionless Strife, and with the set being out about a month later, I've had the opportunity to playtest new cards and different combinations to take this deck to the next level since the previous variation. Now, I've discussed Astram before on this channel, talking about breakdowns and ideas, but I've had a good time really playing this deck. This is one of the few decks from the trial decks I think actually has some really good longevity, just because the generic support for Brandt Gate is actually pretty good, especially the introduction of the Festival Collection having been a couple of weeks or a couple of days from the set introduction. There's a couple of cards to think about trying in here. They're not in here yet, but I will say that in the future for other Astram builds, they might make the cut. Now, Astram himself hasn't really changed in terms of playstyle. This is still going to be a really powerful 4-attack deck. We're relying on his trial deck effect to really keep up with the other stuff. But the generic support that he got is really great. Getting new countercharger as well as some really powerful attack boosters and consistency cards that make this deck a lot better has been fantastic for the overall playstyle. This is an aggro-based Brandt Gate deck. You want to go to turn 3, swing multiple attacks, hit your opponent really hard with your 2 big attacks and your set order combinations, as well as rely on triggers and effects and your other card advantage skills to help maintain your consistency and pressure. Despite this being a long-term aggro deck, I'm not sure what you would call that. I think you'd call it tempo or mid. This deck has been really fun to play. It's definitely nowhere near top tier, but I think that with the future support that we've gotten, this is definitely a lot stronger than when it was first introduced for Astram. I didn't really like the deck when it came out. I know a lot of people thought it was going to be one of the top 3, but Servacio, Marlene, as well as the Dark States one have definitely been still keeping that spot. I do believe that out of all of the start decks, still those are the 3 I personally would play competitively if I had to take anything there, especially Servacio. But I think Astram is slowly creeping its way back up there. Now, with that being said, we'll go ahead and hop right over to deck profile, but before I do that, you already know what's coming next. If you enjoy seeing content like this, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Do not forget to hit the notification bell so you guys are always up to date on my newest videos coming out. Alright, you guys, to get this video started off with, I am playing the Astram ride line for, well, Astram. Astram has a very specific style of play. You really need to get that grade 2 set order to get the full value out of his restand effect. The additional 5k power up for your multi-attacks is going to be extremely important, especially in the later game when your opponent's drawing more cards, getting more pieces. Astram really does need to maximize the full value of this, and with your set order as well as your ride line taking out 2 cards from your deck, it compresses you more as well as gives you the piece needed to take full value of your Vanguard in the future. Obviously, for playing 3 copies of the Man of the Hour, Blitz Gigamobile Astram, like all the trial deck Vanguards, this one has the ability to search out a copy of itself, guaranteeing you Persona Ride per turn 4, but its second skill is most important, as when it attacks a Vanguard, you Energy Blast 4, you choose one of your rear guards, stand it, and until the end of the turn, that unit and this unit get power plus 5,000. Obviously, this is a Vanguard that guarantees you a turn 4 Persona Ride while giving you multi-attacks, which increase the power of both your Vanguard and itself during the battle phase. This is huge, as increasing power in the battle phase means your opponent has to change their defensive game plan based on what numbers you have, and with your power going up and down, well, predominantly up throughout the game period, hopefully not down, you'll be able to affect the way your opponent has to defend your attacks as well as plan in the future for that. And thanks to our grade 2 set order, armor supply vehicle Preciosa, we'll be able to increase our power based off the number of Preciosas we have active from our ride line given to us and the future effects of our other cards. Now, before I showcase the next grade 3, it's really important that we understand the grade 2 set order that is for this deck, which is 4 copies of armor supply vehicle Preciosa. Definitely not my favorite set order. Unfortunately, we do have to play it for this deck. Preciosa applies additional 5,000 power to both the Vanguard and the unit that stands due to Astram's ability. It costs a counterblast to set up, and you don't get any sort of draw or maybe a refund back for it, unlike other personal set orders for other Vanguards, but it is needed for this deck. Astram does have a bit of a power problem, and this fixes that issue by guaranteeing you 2 high-powered attacks, as well as the more you set up, it becomes harder for your other attacks to guard. Hopefully in the future, Astram will get something with a Battle Door effect, or maybe another unit that can restand that's not as expensive as the grade 3 support that he has, or any other future cards that might come out. Therefore, we have to rely on Preciosa's power up and keep it in the deck for right now. Next up, I play 4 copies of Swing by Dragon. This is a generic grade 3 piece 4 Astram support. It gains 2,000 power when you Soul Blast one, to attack a unit, but if you Soul Blast an Astram, this unit restands. It also has an effect when placed on Rearguard Circle from hand. If your Vanguard's Astram, you get to draw a card. This card's a nice cycler, being able to keep your card advantage up, being able to let you draw a card to self-replace it is actually not bad. In a deck like this, it is a little harmful though, because we have to pay very close attention to our counterblast, our Vanguard CBs, our set order CBs, this card CBs. So we are doing a lot of counterblasting in this deck. It's a very important resource you have to pay attention to be successful with Astram. The second skill, however, is the most important one, as on turn 4, once you go do your Persona Ride, you will have access from 4 to 5 attacks as you'll Soul Blast out the Astram you just Persona Rode over from your Ride deck, get to restand this card, additional 2k buff, and the Persona Ride benefit, and other cards and effects as well. Moving on to grade 2s, I'm playing 4 copies of Sickle Blade of Inquest Habitable Zone. This is the Ride Cycler for Brandt Gate. You use this card to keep drawing and Soul Blasting out cards. Our Soul isn't really important in this deck. We'll make it back with other cards and effects, but we don't really care for it. So therefore, being able to convert that into some card advantage is actually very important for Astram, as this deck doesn't really have a way of generating card advantage outside of the Ride line. Therefore, being able to, turn that into something is important. The second skill actually does come up a lot, as because you can counterblast one to search out another copy of Preciosa and make the other Preciosa free, you essentially can get up to 15k power on turn 4, or maybe if you have all 4 Preciosas there, you'll be giving plus 20k to your Vanguard and the unit that's being stood, which guarantees a magic number for both the Vanguard attack and your restander attack. For my next grade 2, I'm playing 4 copies of Panther High Dragon. Now this one might be a bit of a controversial pick, but I actually like Panther High Dragon in this deck. Once again, our Soul doesn't really have any value, so being able to convert that into card advantage is pretty fantastic. Also, Astram doesn't do anything in the early game. This deck does not have any sort of like early game push when I first started playing it, especially at the start deck. Therefore, I wanted to find cards that did something in the early game to give you a fighting chance against decks that do want to push, and Panther High was perfect. Giving up one of your Preciosas is honestly really not that big a deal. Once you get like 2 of these set up, you're honestly good to go, because your Vanguard still gives 5k, so you're still giving 15k power with 2 Preciosas as well as Astram's effect, which I think is honestly a really good number. You can convert those Preciosas into other cards, get you more defensive pieces, or draw in other normal units you want to get a board, and I just felt like it was a better way of taking advantage of that. We also have ways of getting Preciosa out from the drop zone too, if it really does become that big a deal, but I feel like with the Ride line guaranteeing you 2 as well as the Vanguard's effect, you convert those dead set orders into your hand into something else, or convert other bad cards in your hand into something else in the future. Like I said, this deck doesn't have an early game, so therefore I felt like Panther High being able to cycle out her hand and give us something to do in the early game, or at least give us some defensive pieces, was really necessary for this deck. For my next card, I'm playing 1 copy of White Jeweled Beast Synthetica. Like I stated, the Soul doesn't mean anything in this deck, so to be able to convert it into a 20k shield is fantastic. On top of that, this card does have an ability to let you take a set order from your drop zone, add it to your hand. Like I stated, this is one of the pieces that we do play in the deck that lets us get a Preciosa back from the drop zone. Therefore, if I wanted that 3rd or 4th Preciosa and I really needed it, I have this card to help me get there. Otherwise, it's just a really fantastic defensive piece to have and what's usually used for, or to get the other copy of Preciosa when I want to go for that final turn push. Next up, I played 3 copies of Schwarzer Eins. Now, Schwarzer Eins is a unit that lets you move itself into the Soul and draw a card once your grade 2 or higher set order is put into place. I'm playing this card now because prior to the introduction of the new stuff that we got from Illusionless Strife, that grade 2 that gains 5k in boost, I was simply playing this card. If you have that card, Baldred, definitely play that over this. I just like this because this card gives you immediate value compared to Baldred, and idealistically speaking, I wanted, once again, more cards in the early games like put behind the Vanguard and gain some value or attack with, and this card actually did that for me because you'll set Preciosa up on your turn 2, and you can convert that into card advantage and Soul for your other card and effects. However, nonetheless, Baldred is the upgraded version of this card, so therefore, you can play Baldred to get the boost, or you can play this to get the draw. Both are completely up to you. I just didn't have Baldred at the time, but I definitely would play that over this card. For my next grade 1, it's 3 copies of the brand new Progress Globe Dragon. This is the card that I think all Astram mains were really hoping for to come out really soon, and it did. This unit has the ability to, at the end of the battle it boosts, if your unit stood by a card ability that has Astram in its name, you retire this unit, you move a copy of Astram from the Soul or drop to the bottom of the deck, and you get to counter charge 1. This card is fantastic as it's a free countercharger for Astram, which is obviously very important for this deck. And it recycles Astram too, meaning that if we want to keep playing to the long game and keep getting our Astrams back, we have cards like Progress Globe Dragon. That's fantastic for that. And the countercharge is very much welcome too, as this is one of the freest ways to get a countercharge off for a deck that is extremely aggressive with its CC. Next up, I play 4 copies of Detonation Mutant Bulba Mine. More countercharging in this deck. Our grade 2 and grade 3 pieces take up all the counterblasting. We need as much countercharge as possible. Also, this card goes into the soul, so it is one of the soul generating cards we have for cards like Panzer Dragon as well as Swing by Dragon that do eat up our soul for their abilities and Habitable Zone. 4 Sentinels, one of them is Elementaria. Now for triggers, I am playing a total of 8 critical, with 4 of them being the effect crit as well as 4 of them being a generic crit. I started playing the effect crits back into the deck because I've been playing a lot of prison lately against them, and yeah, that's a real deck right now, especially because that busted grade 2 that they got. Therefore, you do want these convert into soul for that matchup. Losing your board does suck in this deck. Astram needs a board to play at full power. Next up, I play 3 front triggers. Now, Astram does have a bit of a card advantage issue, but with how the deck works, I feel like fronts are just overall better. You get to protect your rear guards defensively speaking, as well as you have fronts to power up the rear guard that wasn't boosted up by Astram, and we need as much power as we can get in this deck. This deck, despite the way it looks, is not trying to play into the long game. Once it does its first Persona Ride turn, it really does want to clinch the game there. You'll have your 2 to 3 Preciosa set up, you'll be on the Persona Ride power, you'll have 5 attacks. You're really trying to like push and finish the game as much as possible, as soon as possible as well. And on top of that, with the way that I play this deck, I am dropping units in the early game. I have Panzer Dragon to give me a bit of a numbers boost in the early game as well, so that they are not blocking everything with 5k compared to other Astram builds that I see. And I am very aggressive on my first grade 3 turn with Astram with the restand on Swing By and the restand power up from cards like Panzer and other effects. And once I put Ball Dread in here, I'll have more cards to gain more power from their own effects in here. Therefore, I feel like fronts are just better. You're not trying to play a long game despite what this deck wants to say it wants to do, thinks it wants to do. No, fronts all the way. 1 copy of the Brandt Gate OT. This card is cracked, need I say more? 4 copies of generic heals. Alright you guys, and this is your idealistically winning board. You can't see this card, but this card is Bulba Mine here for a booster. Now, how we want to do this for our winning image is we have gone up to our turn 3, we survived our opponent, we Persona Ride into Astram, we get our 10k, we get our buff, we draw cards, another Swing By, and then you can drop another Swing By or Habitable Zone, but we're going to go ahead, we're going to do Habitable Zone first. Get him into play, counterblast 1, search our deck out for our 3rd or 4th copy of Preciosa that we have, go ahead and set that up, and boom, now every time something stands by Astram's effect, both the Vanguard and that unit will get plus 20,000 power. Give our deck a nice little shuffle here, and then we are all good to go after we play Astram's effect to compress the deck once more to search out a copy of Astram. This deck does a lot of compression, you have a lot of searching going on, a lot of drawing, and it's honestly my favorite version of Astram so far, if I can find my final copy of Astram, because like, there we go. As I was saying, there's a lot of compression, a lot of drawing going on. It's something that I like more than my prior version of Astram or other Astram variants that I've seen. Obviously, there are still changes to be made and more improvements to be made into this deck, but nonetheless, it's been really fun to play so far. And then we just go into our regular old attack pattern. We've taken out 2 cards in our deck. Earlier in the game, we've taken about 4 to 5 cards that are non-triggers, and then we go ahead and start swinging. Attack pattern wise, you're going to want to be swinging and making the best numbers that you possibly can, so we'll go ahead and do something like this. Go 28 here, then we'll swing with our Swing By next, and then it's up to you if you want to use the booster or not, but I know for a fact that I will probably be using his effect right now. To Soul Blast, get my 2k, then go ahead and restand it, and then obviously we'll go ahead and attack with the Vanguard, Twin Drive, critical trigger, crit power, second check, Elementaria, Astram goes in, then we restand and we power that up. We've got Progress Globe to put this Astram to the bottom. Well, in this case it's the Ride deck, so we'll go there, retire, countercharge, and then boom, we've got 2 high-powered attacks ready to go at our opponent. That is the ideal way of Astram and how this deck wants to play and operate in the game. You are trying to get up to turn 4 so that you can do your final turn play. I definitely do think that this deck has more room to grow. It definitely needs more generic support, especially on Brandt Gate's end for more better generic support. There are still some upgrades I am making to the deck, but as of right now, this is my variation of Astram that I've been having a lot of fun with to play, and what I think I'll keep playing up until we get some new stuff. With that being said, card fighters, thank you so much for staying tuned throughout the entirety of this video. I will catch you later. Peace.